Part 1. The Illusion of Love. What Schopenhauer saw that we still don't. There's a moment in every man's life, quiet, piercing, inescapable, where something inside just breaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but something cracks. The illusion begins to falter. You look at the things you once worshipped: romantic love, the promise of forever, the soft certainty of a woman's affection, and you start to wonder, was any of it ever real? Arthur Schopenhauer didn't just ask that question. He ripped the mask off the entire illusion. To him, romance wasn't a salvation. It was a seduction, a trick of nature, a beautifully constructed lie designed not to elevate you, but to control you. You were told love would make you whole. You were told the right woman would understand you, complete you, save you. You believed it, not because you're naive, not because you're weak, but because no one ever taught you to question it. The stories, the songs, the movies, everything whispered that love was the answer. Schopenhauer saw it differently. He saw love not as a divine connection, but as biology wrapped in fantasy, a trap disguised as purpose, a distraction dressed as destiny. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. According to Schopenhauer, men and women are not simply different in body, but in essence. Man, he said, is wired toward ideals, toward building, striving, thinking, creating. Woman, he claimed, is wired toward survival, toward the immediate, the practical, the now. Women remain children their whole lives. He wrote not as an insult, but as a lens. Not because women are foolish, but because their biology compels them to see the present as the only thing that matters. She focuses on the now, the moment, the visible, the tangible, because evolution demanded it. And what about beauty? What about that magnetic pull that makes a man lose his mind? Schopenhauer called it exactly what it is: bait. He believed beauty was not a gift, not something sacred or pure. It was a biological weapon, not malicious, just effective. It's designed to weaken judgment, to disarm your logic, to override your sense of mission and make you submit. And history proves him right. Think about it. How many men, brilliant men, powerful men, visionary men have fallen, not to war, not to politics, not to philosophy, but to a woman they couldn't understand. They built empires and then burned them down for her, not because she asked them to, but because they were blinded by beauty, enchanted by an illusion, captured by the will to life. Here's what Schopenhauer believed about the woman's power. She doesn't dominate the battlefield. She dominates the bedroom. She doesn't command armies. She commands attention, emotion, need. She doesn't force obedience. She suggests. She influences. She gently shifts the emotional climate until the man changes course without ever realizing it. And society, it celebrates this. We call it love. We write poems about it. But to Schopenhauer, it was nothing more than transaction disguised as connection, biology in costume. Love, he wrote, is not what it appears to be. It's not two souls merging. It's not eternal destiny. It's a biological trick, an evolutionary mechanism designed to keep the species going. You think she's your soulmate? Nature doesn't care. It doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about one thing: reproduction. And in order to secure that, it whispers lies into your heart. It convinces you that this one is different. It sells you on hope. It locks you into sacrifice. And before you know it, you're trapped in a contract you thought was sacred, but was really just instinct in disguise. Let's talk about marriage. Schopenhauer didn't see it as a holy union. He saw it as the final defeat, a legal agreement where the man signs away his freedom in exchange for an illusion he can't afford to lose. Not because she's evil, but because he's blind. Marriage, in his view, is nature's final move. It hooks the man emotionally, spiritually, financially, and neutralizes his fire. He starts working not for his mission, not for his soul, but for the maintenance of a system designed to drain him. He becomes the beast of burden, the provider, the man who sacrifices dreams for diapers. And what does he get in return? Resentment, routine, quiet disillusionment. Schopenhauer wasn't bitter. He was brutally clear. He didn't blame women. He didn't call them villains. He simply said, this is how nature works. It's not about personal evil. It's about evolutionary programming. A woman's beauty, it's her tool, her charm, her shield, her intuition, her weapon. And a man who doesn't understand this, he's not romantic. He's not noble. He's vulnerable. He thinks he's choosing her, but really, he's being chosen by biology, by instinct, by forces he never questioned. So what happens? He gives up his solitude. He gives up his ambition. He gives up his identity. And step by step, the fire in his chest goes dim, not because she extinguished it, but because he handed it over willingly, blindly, lovingly. He thought it was growth, but it was surrender. He thought he was evolving, but he was fading. And yet, the world claps. They call him mature. They call it love. They call his sacrifice beautiful. But Schopenhauer begs us to ask, what if the man who gives up his fire isn't growing? What if he's just disappearing? Part 2. The quiet disappearance of the modern man. It doesn't happen overnight. The man doesn't just wake up one morning and forget who he is. It's slow, subtle, 1,000 little choices, 1,000 little surrenders. At first it's harmless. He compromises on a plan. He adjusts a goal. He skips a workout. He cancels a project, all for her, because he cares, because he loves, because he thinks that's what a good man does. But Schopenhauer would argue that's the beginning of the end. Not because love is evil, not because women are bad, but because the moment a man lives for someone else's approval, he's no longer living for his own purpose. He begins to orbit around her instead of around his mission. He starts shaping his identity based on what pleases her, what comforts her, what keeps her from walking away. He thinks it's devotion, but it's dependency. He thinks it's sacrifice, but it's surrender. And that's exactly what Schopenhauer tried to warn us about. He saw men not as conquerors, not as dominators, but as builders. Builders of ideas, of empires, of meaning, of thought, of beauty. Men are natural creators. Give them solitude and they invent. Give them silence and they reflect. Give them purpose and they build civilizations. But what happens when that man is pulled from his center? When he trades the mountain for the dining room? When he stops asking what he was born to do and starts asking what she needs from him? What happens is this. He loses the thread. He becomes the caretaker of comfort instead of the carrier of truth. He becomes a version of himself that's more palatable, more agreeable, more soft. not because he changed for the better, but because he stopped fighting to stay true. And let's not mistake this for bitterness. This isn't a war between men and women. This isn't about hate. This is about clarity. Schopenhauer didn't want men to hate women. He wanted them to understand the game, because only when you see the rules can you choose how to play. He believed that most men are not broken by hardship, not by war, not by poverty, but by love. Not real love, the illusion of it. The illusion that whispers, "She will complete you. She will heal you. She will stay if you give more." And so the man gives. He gives his time. He gives his ambition. He gives his truth until there's nothing left but a shell. A shell that smiles at family photos. A shell that pays the bills. A shell that slowly forgets the man he used to be. And while he fades, she thrives. Not because she's malicious, but because she understands something he doesn't. Power is not always loud. Sometimes it's soft. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's whispered. She doesn't force him to change. He changes himself. She doesn't demand his soul. He hands it over, not because she asked, but because he thought it was the cost of love. And that's what makes it so tragic. Schopenhauer argued that women, having never been granted traditional power, evolved to master influence instead. They don't conquer through force. They shape through suggestion. They lead without leading. They demand without speaking. They steer without touching the wheel. And most men never see it because they're too busy dreaming. Dreaming of the one, dreaming of happy endings, dreaming of soft voices and warm hands that make everything okay. But here's what Schopenhauer knew. The man who dreams without awareness is the man who suffers the most when he wakes up. Because when the illusion breaks, when the marriage ends, when the affection fades, when the eyes that once adored him turn cold, he isn't just heartbroken. He's spiritually bankrupt, and the world doesn't prepare him for this. It tells him to chase love, to give everything, to be vulnerable, but it never tells him how to protect himself. It never tells him to build a core that cannot be moved. It never tells him that self-respect is more important than emotional access. It never tells him that the moment you bend your purpose to be lovable, you've already lost. So, what do? We rewrite the script. We stop pretending love is always pure. We stop calling sacrifice maturity. We stop telling men they're noble when they abandon themselves for approval. And we start telling the truth. Real love does not require you to vanish. Schopenhauer's answer wasn't anger. It was detachment. Not isolation, not bitterness, but clarity. He looked at the saints, the sages, the men of solitude, the Stoics, the Buddha, not as cold outcasts, but as awakened men, men who saw the illusion and said, "I'll pass," men who chose wisdom over warmth, men who valued peace over praise. They didn't give up love. They gave up dependency. They gave up the belief that someone else could make them whole. That's the message here. You don't have to reject connection. You don't have to fear intimacy. But you do have to stop worshiping the illusion. You have to stop offering your soul like it's a token for emotional validation. Because if you don't, you will become the man who gave up everything for a dream. And when the dream ends, you won't even recognize yourself. So ask yourself, Are you becoming more of yourself, or are you becoming what you think she wants? Are you climbing your mountain, or are you building someone else's nest? Are you living your truth, or are you performing your worth? Because the answer to that question will determine the man you become in the next decade. And that man, he will either be free or forgotten. Part 3, the illusion of maturity and the slow death of purpose. Society has a word for what happens to most men. They call it maturity. You get older, you stop chasing dreams, you get realistic, you settle down, you trade your fire for stability, you stop taking risks and start playing safe. And if anyone questions you, you say, "I'm just being responsible." This is what a man is supposed to do. But Schopenhauer wasn't buying that. He called it what it was, a quiet surrender. Not growth, not wisdom, just a slow reaping death of self. Look around. How many men do you know who used to dream, big speak, boldly move like they had fire in their veins? And now they've become shadows. They still smile, but it doesn't reach their eyes. They still work, but not with purpose. They still show up, but not for themselves. Why? Because they gave everything to the illusion that said, if I do this, I'll be enough. If I become this version of a man provider, husband protector, then maybe finally I'll be worthy of love. But that version wasn't them. It was a costume, a mask, one they wore for so long they forgot what their real face looked like. Schopenhauer knew that this kind of man wasn't rare. He was everywhere. And he was suffering, not because he didn't love, but because he loved blindly. He mistook obedience for virtue. He thought comfort was peace. He confused being needed with being respected. And worst of all, he called his suffering normal. Let's be honest. Most men don't crash and burn. They just slowly fade out. They start saying yes when they want to say no. They stop speaking up when something feels wrong. They let go of their standards. They soften their voice, their body, their beliefs. Not because they've evolved, but because they've been trained to fear conflict, to avoid discomfort, to not rock the boat. And so they drift deeper into routines that don't fulfill them, deeper into relationships that slowly mute them, deeper into lives that look stable but feel like prison cells. And the world celebrates this. They post it on Instagram. They frame it as relationship goals. They say, "Look how committed he is. Look at how happy they are." But you see it in his eyes. You see it in his body, his posture, his silence. The man who used to build now just maintains. The man who used to dream now just survives. And what's worse, he thinks this is just part of being a man. Schopenhauer refused that lie. He said, no, this is not masculinity, this is domestication. And domestication, when it's not chosen consciously, is slavery. The man has been trained, groomed, even to be useful, to make others comfortable, to carry burdens. But who carries who protects his fire, who defends his soul? If not him, then no one. This is the core message. If you don't fight for your inner world, the outer world will consume you. If you don't protect your mission, someone else's needs will take its place. If you don't define who you are, you'll become what someone else needs you to be. And that's when you lose everything. Not all at once. First your time, then your passion, then your identity. And before you realize it, you become a man who doesn't recognize his own voice in the mirror. So, what's the answer? It's not isolation. It's not rejection of women. It's not giving up on love. It's choosing awareness over anesthesia. It's choosing to see through the roles, to question the script, to stop performing and start being. It's standing in front of the mirror and asking, who am I really? When no one is watching, when no one needs anything from me, when I'm not trying to be loved or praised or accepted, who am I? That man, that raw, unfiltered version, is the one Schopenhauer wanted you to protect, because he's the only one that's real. But here's the hard truth. That man is dangerous, not to others, but to systems that feed on compliance. He's dangerous because he can't be manipulated by flattery. He's dangerous because he doesn't trade integrity for intimacy. He's dangerous because he sees comfort as a test, not a goal. He walks away from offers that most men would kill for. He says no when it costs him everything. He keeps his fire even when the world begs him to put it out, not because he wants to be lonely, but because he refuses to be tamed. That's what freedom really is. Not doing whatever you want, but being who you are, even when it's inconvenient, even when it means losing her, even when it means walking away from the warmth, even when it means hearing you've changed and replying, yes, I woke up. So what does the awakened man look like? He's not loud. He's not angry. He doesn't argue with people who don't get it. He just moves differently. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't seek approval. He doesn't chase love. He chooses it, but only if it respects his core. And if it doesn't, he walks away with peace, not bitterness. Schopenhauer believed the truly free man is the one who doesn't need to be liked. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't crave being understood. He doesn't require applause, because he lives for something higher than comfort. He lives for truth, for meaning, for clarity. And when a man is clear, he becomes unbreakable. So if you're feeling something right now, that ache in your chest, that tightening in your stomach, that voice whispering, "This is me," don't ignore it. That's your real self trying to speak. Let it speak. Let it burn through the roles, the expectations, the false maturity. Because beneath all of it is you. The builder, the philosopher, the flame. And that man, he's ready to come home. Part 4. The philosopher's path. From seduction to solitude. Let's be honest about something. Most men, good men, strong men, spend the better part of their lives being seduced, not just by women, but by ideas. Ideas about love, ideas about duty, ideas about what a good man is supposed to be. And the most dangerous of these ideas, that the more you sacrifice, the more worthy you become. It sounds noble, it sounds honorable. But Schopenhauer would say it's a trap, because what you end up sacrificing isn't laziness or ego or weakness. You sacrifice yourself, your mind, your vision, your freedom, and you do it willingly. Worse, you do it with pride. Let's go deeper. Imagine two men. One walks through life with a checklist: get the job, get the girl, get the house, keep the peace. He follows the path laid out for him by culture, by media, by tradition. And then there's the second man. He pauses. He questions. He doesn't just ask, "What do I want?" He asks, "Why do I want it?" He starts to see through the veil. He sees how desire is manufactured, how romance is marketed, how identity is molded by repetition. That second man, He's dangerous, not because he's violent, but because he's free. And this is what Schopenhauer meant by the highest form of man being the philosopher, the man who sees clearly, who chooses solitude over seduction, not because he's antisocial, but because he's awake. This man doesn't chase. He doesn't plead. He doesn't perform. He studies. He reflects. He watches the world with sharp eyes and a quiet heart, because he knows. The more deeply he understands the game, the less likely he is to be a pawn in it. Now let's talk about solitude. Society fears solitude. It treats being alone as a failure. You're not in a relationship. Something must be wrong. You don't want to settle down. You'll regret it one day. But solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is fortress. It's the space where a man meets himself. No noise, no expectations, no roles to play. Just silence, and in that silence, truth. Because when you strip away the need to be needed, you find out who you actually are. And what you find might scare you, or it might liberate you. But either way, it's real. Schopenhauer didn't just advocate for solitude. He revered it. To him, solitude was the birthplace of clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of thought, clarity of identity. Because only in solitude can you separate your voice from the voices of others. And when you finally hear yourself without echo, you realize how many of your choices were never truly yours. You didn't want the house. You were told you should. You didn't want to settle down. You wanted to be settled within. You didn't want constant affection. You wanted peace and confused it with validation. This is the awakening. This is the shift. When a man stops asking, what will make me loved, and starts asking, what will make me whole? When he stops chasing a woman to complete him and starts building a life that doesn't require completion because it's already full. This doesn't mean giving up on connection. It means no longer trading your soul for it. It means seeing intimacy not as a reward, but as a bonus, not the goal. Let's be real. The man who walks this path will be misunderstood. People will say he's cold, detached, too serious, too logical. But what they don't see is the fire underneath. A fire not fueled by need, but by truth. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't try to convince. He just lives, deliberately, quietly, with discipline. He no longer needs to be wanted, because he has chosen to want himself. And that right there is the core of Schopenhauer's vision. Not a man who hates women, not a man who denies love, but a man who will not be defined by them, a man who refuses to trade his peace for passion, a man who knows that clarity will always cost him comfort, and chooses clarity anyway. This man is rare, but when he exists, he shifts everything. He no longer needs to dominate. He doesn't seek revenge on the world for deceiving him. He simply removes himself from the illusion. He stops dancing to music he never chose. He builds in silence. He speaks only when the words are his own, and his life becomes proof, not of perfection, but of power. So, if you're still with me, still watching, still feeling that flicker in your gut, ask yourself, have I been performing? Have I been hoping someone else would name my worth? Have I been waiting for permission to be me? Because the moment you stop waiting, the moment you stop asking the world to crown you, that's when you realize you were never meant to beg. You were meant to build. This is what Schopenhauer believed, that the man who walks alone may look like he's lost. But in truth, he's the only one who knows exactly where he's going. Part 5. The Unbreakable Man. The one who no longer needs to be chosen. So what happens when you finally stop asking to be chosen? When you no longer look at love as a reward to be won, but a choice you make with eyes open, not from desperation, not from emptiness, but from fullness. That is the moment you become unbreakable. Because a man who no longer needs anything from love becomes a man who is finally capable of real love. Not bargaining, not begging, not hoping that she'll stay so you can avoid facing yourself, but showing up as a whole being, one who isn't there to be completed, but to create. Not to be saved, but to share. And that changes everything, because most relationships today aren't built on truth. They're built on roles, on performance, on silent contracts that say, I'll play my part if you play yours. But what if you walked away from all that? What if you showed up not needing her to be the one, because you've already become the one for yourself? What if your life was already full, not with noise, but with meaning? What if you stopped needing someone to believe in you because you finally believe in yourself? That's what Schopenhauer was pointing to. Not isolation, not bitterness, but independence of the soul. When a man no longer seeks a mirror for his worth, he becomes a force. He's not immune to love. He's just no longer enslaved by it. He can still feel deeply, still connect fully, still cherish tenderness. But he does so without disappearing. He can hold a woman with both strength and softness, but never let go of his own spine, because he knows the second you give someone else the power to define you, you've given them the power to destroy you. And the awakened man refuses that deal. He doesn't play games. He doesn't chase. He doesn't perform. He simply stands, clear, present, alive. People will ask you, but don't you want someone? And the answer is honest. I don't need someone. I want someone who sees me, not who completes me. Because anything built on need will eventually rot. But anything built on truth can last forever. That's not cold. That's clarity. That's not rejection. That's responsibility. And yes, it will scare some people away, especially those who are hoping you'd play along, that you keep pretending, that you'd still be seduced by smiles and softness. But you won't, not because you've hardened, but because you've ripened, because you've realized that your peace is more valuable than their approval. Schopenhauer didn't want men to be loveless. He wanted men to be aware, to see the game, to understand the dance, to stop getting played simply because no one ever handed them the rules. And when you see the rules, you don't rage against them, you rise above them. You don't resent women. You respect them enough to meet them as equals. You don't worship, you witness. You don't beg, you build. So here you are now, awake, and maybe it hurts a little. Maybe the stories you were told growing up feel a bit hollow now. Maybe the songs, the movies, the soft promises, they don't land the same. That's okay. Disillusionment is not the end. It's the beginning of your actual life, the beginning of your actual freedom, the beginning of you. And from here, everything changes. You don't walk into love like a beggar. You don't enter relationships like a soldier hoping for peace. You come in as a sovereign, already full, already whole, already home. You don't settle for someone who validates your wounds. You connect with someone who honors your growth. You don't chase affection because you're afraid of being alone. You offer presence because you enjoy sharing space. And if they stay, they stay. If they go, they go. But either way, you're still you, unshaken, unapologetic, unowned. That is what it means to be a free man. And when a man becomes free, he's not harder to love, he's just impossible to enslave. So, if this message struck a nerve, if you're still here, still watching, still breathing through that quiet discomfort, let it do its work. Don't numb it, don't escape it, don't explain it away. Let it burn away what's false. Let it strip you of the roles you were taught to play. Because once the illusion is gone, the real work begins. And in that space, you don't just find clarity, you find power. And not the kind that needs to be seen or praised, but the kind that's rooted so deep inside you, no one can ever take it again. Part 6. Beyond the illusion, living as a man who remembers who he is. You've made it here through the noise, through the unraveling, through the uncomfortable truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. So now what's left? What happens after the illusions are shattered? After you've stopped performing? After you've stopped needing to be chosen? After you've stopped mistaking comfort for truth? What's left is you. Not the version society sold you, not the one who begs for love, not the one who trades dreams for domestic peace. The real you. And here's the hard part, the part no one tells you. That man will scare people, not because he's violent, not because he's cruel, but because he's free. Freedom is terrifying to those still shackled by illusions. To the man still chasing validation, you'll seem cold. To the woman still relying on unconscious power, you'll seem unreachable. To the world that profits from your obedience, you'll seem dangerous. But the truth is, you're just clear. You're not refusing love. You're refusing to be used by a fantasy called love. You're not avoiding commitment. You're committing to the one thing you'll never betray again, yourself. This clarity, it's a quiet fire. It doesn't shout. It doesn't plead. It just burns. And from that fire, a new kind of man is born. Not a bitter man, not a recluse, but a man who moves through the world on his own terms. He doesn't chase a woman who won't meet him at eye level. He doesn't waste energy trying to prove he's worthy. He knows he is because he proves it to himself every day through his choices, his discipline, his craft. And if someone joins him on that path, great. If not, he keeps walking because he no longer confuses loneliness with lack. He no longer treats solitude as punishment. He sees it for what it truly is, power. You want to know what real masculinity looks like? It's not domination. It's not performance. It's presence. It's that calm, unmovable force that doesn't get shaken by rejection or seduced by praise. It's knowing who you are when nobody's clapping. It's doing what's right when no one's watching. It's building a life so rooted in truth that even love must meet you there or not at all. Schopenhauer wasn't telling you to hate women. He was telling you to stop forgetting yourself for them. He was saying, stop romanticizing what is at its core, a biological strategy. Stop offering your soul in exchange for a momentary sense of being needed, because every time you do, you sell off another piece of your integrity. And without integrity, what are you? Not a man, not a builder, not a thinker, not a leader. Just another echo living someone else's script. You've heard enough stories. You've been given enough dreams. Now it's time to write your own. To build not a fantasy, but a foundation. And that foundation, it starts with one decision. I will no longer abandon myself for anyone or anything. From that moment on, the way you walk changes. You don't reach out in fear. You don't ask for permission. You don't wait to be rescued. You lead, and ironically, that's when the world starts to follow. Not because you begged it to, but because nothing is more magnetic than a man who no longer needs applause. Now, hear this. You are not here to live someone else's idea of success. You're not here to check boxes, to fit in, to perform. You are here to remember, to rebuild, to reclaim. And that journey, it doesn't begin with love. It begins with loss, the loss of every lie you've ever believed. It begins with that ache in your chest when you realize how much of yourself you gave away. It begins when you stop waiting to be picked and finally choose yourself. From here, it's not about isolation. It's about selection. You no longer open your heart to anyone who smiles at you. You protect your energy like gold. You give slowly, deliberately, not out of fear, but out of value. Because now you know you're not a resource to be drained. You're a force to be honored. And if she can't see that, she's not your mirror. She's your lesson. You were never meant to shrink. You were never meant to kneel. You were never meant to die a quiet death in a home built on compromise. You were meant to stand, to think, to question, to live fully, clearly, and without apology. So, if this message opened your eyes, if it made you feel a little angry, a little uncomfortable, maybe even a little sad, good, let it, because that discomfort, that's your soul remembering. That's the man inside you waking up. Don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to the performance. Don't go back to needing a woman's affection to feel like you matter. Let Schopenhauer's warning become your armor, not to fight women, but to protect yourself from forgetting. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be free. And freedom doesn't beg. Freedom doesn't bargain. Freedom walks alone. If this voice reached something deep inside you, share it. Not for views, not for clout, but because there's a man out there lost, loyal to the wrong dream, kneeling to the wrong queen, who needs to hear this before it's too late. Let him hear it. Let you hear it again. And then stand up and walk the road only a free man can walk.